And now let me introduce Caleb Maupin. Caleb has been a communist organizer and activist for the past 16 years. In 2010 in Cleveland, Ohio, students walked out of Collinwood High School to protest teacher layoffs. The police responded by violently arresting Destiny and Deasia Bruno. Luckily, Caleb was there to film what happened, and his video showing police brutality got one of the sisters acquitted in juvenile court. Caleb was also part of the planning of the Occupy Wall Street movement, and he was arrested during the protests there. Caleb was one of the few voices at Occupy demanding that they stand in solidarity with Libya against the NATO bombing campaign and with Gaddafi. He has been a featured speaker at international conferences held in Quito, Sochi, Moscow, Tehran, and Brasilia. In 2015, he was part of a humanitarian mission by the Red Crescent Society attempting to bring aid to war-torn Yemen. The ship created an international incident, and Saudi Arabia bombed the port of Hodeidah 8 times in a single day to prevent the aid from being delivered. In 2017, Caleb debated white supremacist Augustus Sol Invictus, putting forward anti-racist revolutionary patriotism as an alternative to Invictus's white supremacist ideology, demagoguery. Julian Assange was so moved by the debate that he tweeted it out and emailed it to thousands of friends and allies. As a correspondent for RT, Caleb has many heated exchanges with U.S. State Department spokespeople. And in March of 2016, Donald Trump accidentally called Caleb his favorite reporter. This was when calling on Caleb to ask a question. Trump's, who's my favorite reporter? Caleb Maupin is a visionary, bringing forward a realistic project to bring 21st century socialism to America. He has had the boldness to create the Center for Political Innovation and to bring so many young people just like me into a life of revolutionary organizing. With deep revolutionary love for you all and an optimistic outlook towards tomorrow, I present to you the man who brought us all together here tonight, founder and director, Caleb Maupin.
To stay standing and stretch. Just stretch as much as you can. It's been a long day. It's been a long day. Stretch. Just get a good stretch. All right, very, very good. Now you can sit down. Now you can sit down. I'm going to take this off of here. It's been a long day. We've heard a lot of speeches and a lot of presentations. We don't know how often we're going to have the opportunity to have conferences like this, so it's important that we get as much in as we possibly can. So thank you for being here. I know it's late. I'm going to try to not take too long because I know we've all got places to go. We're tired. We've been working hard. But I want to just point out, isn't it really a great thing that CPI is not an online organization? Having gatherings like this, where people come together, where we're among friends, we're among allies, where we see that we're not alone, where we don't get stuck in that crazy internet world. You know, I tell people Twitter isn't real. Did you know that? Twitter is not real. Facebook isn't real. But what we're doing today here, this is real. So I want us all to now take a deep breath. Breathe in. Breathe out. Let's do it one more time. Take a deep breath. Breathe in. Breathe out. When we breathe, that's a pattern. And patterns are very important to human beings. Patterns give us security in a world that is often very, very insecure. Right? Patterns, the ability to know what's coming, is one thing human beings depend on. Think about your heartbeat. Your heartbeat is a pattern. And paying attention to patterns, being able to know what's coming, that's something that's very, very important for human beings and trying to relate to the world and trying to find some sense of security. Today is Saturday, and I don't know what tomorrow will bring, but I do know that every Saturday in my whole life has been followed by a Sunday. And every Sunday in my whole life has been followed by a Monday. And every Monday in my whole life has been followed by a Tuesday. We don't know what the coming Sunday will be like, but we do know that we can count on it coming. And that's one level of security that we do have. And that's very important to us. And if you look throughout human history, a lot of the way human beings have dealt with patterns and trying to find patterns in the universe, trying to find things that bring us security, one of the ways we've dealt with it is by telling stories. Right? We know about some of the stories from the Native American tradition, some of the stories from ancient Greece and Rome, some of the stories from China. Stories that give us a sense of security. For example, here's a story for you, a brief one. The story goes that there was a greedy Wall Street banker who was working really late one night at his office. He was working really, really late one night at his office. And all of a sudden, the devil appeared to him. Out of nowhere, in a cloud of smoke, the devil appeared, and he said, "Sir, I am here to offer you a deal." And he said, "Okay, go ahead." The devil said, "I will triple your profits for the next 10 years. He said, "That sounds pretty good. What do you want in exchange?" He said, "All I want in exchange is the soul of your wife and children to burn in hell for all eternity." And the capitalist, banker, billionaire was silent. There was dead silence. The devil said to him, "Will you take the deal?" Dead silence. The devil said, "Will you take the deal?" Dead silence. The devil said, "All right, you got to make a decision right now. Will you take the deal?" And the capitalist said, "No." The devil said, "Why won't you take the deal?" He said, "I've been in business a long time. No deal is ever this good." And why is that story funny? It's funny because it points to a higher truth. It points to the reality. We've all seen what this system does to people, how it makes them heartless, how it plays them against each other. It drives this selfishness, driving us all into atomized individuals, breaking down the connection between us. We've seen that, and so that story makes sense. And I'm sure those of you who follow what I do, you all know what I'm about to say next, which is, if I said to you, faster than a speeding bullet, faster than a locomotive, able to leap a tall building in a single bound, look up at the sky, it's a bird, it's a plane, it's... I've talked a lot about how Superman, one of his first adventures was to rescue a group of striking workers, how Superman fought against the Ku Klux Klan during the Second World War to show that racism was just what the Nazis were about and was un-American. I've told you all what the way you say man of steel in Russian and how that wasn't a coincidence. But I also want to point out, and I think it is worth pointing out, that there's more to the reason that I've tried to popularize Superman than simply those historical observations. One of the reasons I've tried to point him out is not just the explicit politics you can find in the early Superman comics, but also the attitude that Superman has. Superman has a smile on his face. Superman is not vengeful. He's not trying to destroy anybody. He's not trying to harm anybody. He's not trying to punish people. In fact, Superman doesn't even want to be famous. He lives a humble life as mild-mannered reporter Clark Kent. He doesn't care if anyone ever knows who he is. And he's reluctant. But then, every so often, there's a situation where it looks like a job for Superman, and he's got no choice but to swing into action and do what's needed. When I think about Superman, I think about my grandparents, both of whom fought in the Second World War on both sides. My grandfathers fought in the Second World War. My grandmother was a nurse in Britain when the Battle of Normandy was happening and was taking in injured soldiers. And my other grandmother worked in a defense factory making bullets to go and fight the Nazis. And when they talk about the greatest generation, the World War II generation, they really incarnated a lot of those values. These are people that had been through the Great Depression. They'd been through all that hardship and suffering. They'd seen people starving on the streets, and they'd organized, and they built unions. And they put Roosevelt in a situation where he had to give them concessions, and he had to enter an alliance with the Communist Party to defeat the fascist threat. And there's a lot we can learn from that generation. And it's tragic that so many of those folks aren't with us anymore, because the knowledge of what they've been through a big capitalist crisis that exploded into a world war, the knowledge of that generation is really valuable. And that's why I know a lot of us have really taken great inspiration when we read the writings of William Z. Foster, when we read the writings of Moishe Olgin, when we read the writings of communist organizers from that period, because what they were facing on a smaller scale is what we're facing now: a global capitalist crisis, fascism on the rise, the danger of a new world war. And that's why I've done my best to try and revive 1930s communism, the principles that built the Communist Party to be an organization of hundreds of thousands of people that gathered in Madison Square Garden. But I actually want to refer to yet another story. And this is a story that any of us who grew up in the Christian tradition or the Jewish tradition or the Islamic tradition probably had hammered into our heads when we were kids. And the story is about a man named Noah. And the story is that Noah got a message from God that a giant storm was going to come. That storm would be so massive that it would lead to flooding. And so Noah heard this message about a flood, and he started building an ark, started building a ship so that his family and his people would be safe when the flood came. All right, we've heard this story. And I think it's pretty safe to say that this is a story that is very, very important to human beings. There's something in this story, whether you believe it's true or not, that really speaks to us, right? That he got this message, and despite the fact that nobody agreed with him, despite the fact that everyone wasn't going along with him, he started building that ark because it knew it needed to be done. That actually reminds me of a quotation you can find here in the Little Red Book. In the Little Red Book by Mao Zedong, they quote Mao's famous essay that he wrote in 1927. He wrote it in 1927. This is what he wrote. In a very short time, in China's central and southern provinces, several 100 million peasants will rise like a mighty storm, like a hurricane, a force so swift and violent that no power, however great, will be able to hold it back. They will smash the trammels that bind them on the road to liberation. They will sweep all the imperialists, warlords, corrupt officials, local tyrants, and evil gentry into their graves. And every revolutionary party and every revolutionary comrade will be put to the test, to be accepted or rejected as they decide. And there are three alternatives: to march at their head and lead them, to trail behind them, gesticulating and criticizing, or stand in their way and oppose them. Every Chinese is free to choose, but events will force you to make the choice quickly. Now that's Mao Zedong in 1927. What's he saying there? He's saying a storm is coming. A storm is coming, and if we don't take the correct action now, and if we don't put ourselves in the right position, when that storm comes, it's going to blow right all over us. But if we do the right thing, and we get prepared, when that storm comes, everything can change. Right. And if you look at China today, everything has changed. I'm sorry, we hear so much of this: communism failed, communism never achieved anything. The next time someone says that to you, ask them, what was China like before 1949, and what is China like today? Pretty fair question. And don't tell me, oh, it's all about foreign investment. That's because they became capitalists. Really? Well, there's been a lot of foreign investment in Africa for the past 200 years. How's Africa doing? They've had foreign investment in Central America. How are they doing? It's not foreign investment that created China as the second largest economy in the world. It's not foreign investment that built the world's largest telecommunications manufacturer. It's not foreign investment that raised 800 million people out of poverty. It was the fact that somebody saw that a storm was coming and decided to take swift and decisive action. And you know, Mao, when he wrote that in 1927, that was a heated polemic. That was a heated polemic that he was writing. He was criticizing his own comrades and saying, yeah, we're organizing in the cities. Yeah, we're building an alliance with the KMT. That's not where the storm's coming from. We got to get to the countryside. And you know, also, China's achievements, even during its earliest years, were astonishing. For example, the Barefoot Doctors Program. It was because of Mao Zedong that in the 1950s, millions and millions of Chinese peasants who had never seen a doctor in their entire lives got medical care because the Chinese Communist Party launched the Barefoot Doctor Program. And you know, it's because of Mao Zedong, and this is so shocking to me, it's because of Mao Zedong that there are thousands of Chinese children who saw the sun. Did you know this? Do you know about this? They used to have mines in China that children worked in. Children are smaller, and so they can fit into the mines. And there were children who woke up every morning, they were awakened up every morning before the sun had come up, taken down to a mine to spend the whole day working, and not allowed to come back above that mine until it was dark again. And until Mao Zedong and the Chinese Communist Party came to power, these people had never seen the sun. These little children had never seen the sun until the Chinese Communist Party came to power. Now don't tell me communism failed. Don't tell me communism never achieved anything, for goodness sakes. One story I've heard is that in the 1970s, there were many American delegations who went to China, and one of the people that they would meet with was a woman who at the time of the Chinese Revolution was Roman Catholic. And the Communist Party took power, and she was somewhat sympathetic, but she didn't join because she said, I'm a Christian and the Catholic teaching rejects Marxism, so I'm not going to join. And she said that for about a decade, she was going to church every Sunday, and she was praying that the people in China might start to have food. She was praying that people in China might start to have health care. And she was praying that people in China might have an opportunity to have education, to learn to read and write. She said, after a while, she started to realize that all the things she was praying for were actually starting to happen. And she said it occurs to her that maybe God works through people, and maybe she didn't need to wait for an angel from heaven to do it. Maybe popular power was the way these things could get done. But it all started with someone saying that a storm was coming, and saying we have to swiftly change our tactics, we have to swing into action because something's going to happen. And when Mao Zedong wrote his essay, he was critiquing what is a deviation or a flaw in the Marxist movement, which is what you can call economic determinism. Some people read Karl Marx and his writings and say, oh, it'll just naturally happen, right? Feudalism just naturally turned into capitalism, and eventually capitalism will just naturally kind of turn into socialism, and that's how these things work. And it'll just kind of naturally, one step at a time, will gradually happen. Economic forces are beyond our control. No individual can have an impact on it. That's not what Karl Marx said. 1851, Karl Marx wrote, "Men make their own history, but they do not make it as they please. They do not make it under self-selected circumstances, but under circumstances existing already, given and transmitted from the past. The tradition of all dead generations weighs like a nightmare on the brains of the living." And what Karl Marx is saying is that yes, the role of an individual is important. The role of people and the decisions people make are important. Yes, you have to deal with the deck of cards you've been dealt, but you can make a decision about what to do in those circumstances, and it makes a huge difference. And if you read a very important book that's often referred to in the history of the Marxist movement called What Is to Be Done, you'll hear the exact same arguments. And what is to be done? Vladimir Lenin is saying a storm is coming. A crisis is on the horizon. And if we're going to win this thing, we got to change the way we're operating. We got to start having a party of new type. We got to engage in agitation and propaganda. We got to restructure the way we operate, because there's a chance that when this storm comes, we can actually win this thing. We need to change what we're doing. And if you read Vladimir Lenin's What Is to Be Done, one of the main things he screams and yells against is tailism and bowing to spontaneity. What is that? That's something we see a lot of these days, isn't it? Whatever's trendy, whatever's hip, whatever's going around, we just go along with it. Whatever the Democrats are doing, whatever the liberals are doing, whatever's cool on Twitter, whatever's being promoted, that's what we do. And that's what most of the socialist groups are doing. They're engaging in tailism. They are engaging in tailism. And tailism did not make China the second largest economy in the world. And tailism did not make Russia a superpower that could defeat the Nazis. Again, they tell us communism failed. How many people were lifted out of poverty from the Soviet Union? The biggest power plants in the world, the biggest steel industry in the world. Who invented LED lights? Who invented space travel, for goodness sakes? Who launched Sputnik? It was the Soviet Union. But it took people getting over the tailism, getting over going along with it, and making a decision. Deciding that they would make themselves an object of history, that they would force themselves into the political process, that they would do something. They would look at the circumstances that they're in, and they would make some tough decisions and do what needed to be done so that when the storm came, they were ready, and they could turn that storm into something beautiful. That's what it took. And I'm here to tell you all, I really tried not to see this. I really tried. I was a good member of a certain Marxist group that was engaging in endless tailism, and I tried to not see what was in front of my eyes. And I went along with it. As you all know, I was supporting everything that was going on, and I was engaging in all kinds of activism, but I was in an organization that was engaging in tailism. And I'll never forget the day that we had a meeting that I was begged to go to. I almost didn't want to go to it. And they had a meeting and they said, you know, we're planning Black Lives Matter protests at our office. You know, we're planning these Black Lives Matter protests at our office every week. And there's like 80 people who come to our office, but not a single one of them has joined the party. And why is that? And they pointed to me, the only person under the age of 70 in the room, well, 60 maybe, and they pointed to me, they said, Caleb, you're a young person, tell us, why are none of these young people that come to our office every week to organize Black Lives Matter protests, why are they not joining us? I said to them, they're not joining because they don't agree with you. People don't join an organization that is sympathetic to China and North Korea and Cuba because they think protests are really cool and they saw it on Twitter. People join revolutionary organizations that are dedicated to bringing socialism because they're won to a political line, because they're fighting for a whole new world, and engaging in tailism is not going to do it. It requires political innovation. And then, I've talked many times about how in 2013 I went to the World Festival of Youth and Students in Quito, Ecuador. And I went to that World Festival of Youth and Students, and it was amazing. I met communists from Africa, communists from Asia, communists from Latin America, communists from Angola, communists from Vietnam, communists from Indonesia, communists from corners of the world that were very different from our own. And they all said, basically, more or less, in very polite and careful words, they said, what's wrong with American communists? Why are you guys so weird? What is wrong with you guys? And why is it that over the course of the last 50 years, you guys have never built up a base among the population? Why is it you don't have big trade unions like we have? Why do you not have members of parliament aligned with you? What is going on? When I listen to American communists, I hear something completely different than what our movement is about. Those words burned in my head, and I couldn't unhear them. They burned in my head. And then, as Lily talked about, I went on a ship to Yemen. And, you know, I was on that ship for 13 days. And on some level, I think I did not know how much danger I was in when I was on that ship. I think I was just kind of on autopilot. But for those who may not be aware, the Israeli government and the Saudi government both put out a memo saying that we were smuggling weapons to Yemen, which we were not doing. And then I saw U.S. fighter planes flying over our head, like nosediving. I was very afraid. I was very scared. and I thought about my life, and I thought about the people in Yemen, and I thought about the people who were struggling. And then, on that ship, I did a lot of reflection. Why am I here? Why am I doing this? What is this about? What is this about? And that's when I realized that I didn't become a communist when I was 15. I didn't become a communist at Occupy Wall Street. I became a communist when I was a small child in Ohio. And I was going to vacation Bible school at a Lutheran church that my grandmother attended. In a little, the whole church, you could not see another building for the whole place. It was surrounded completely by cornfields. It was a tiny little Lutheran church, a vacation Bible school. I learned about somebody who said that the last shall be first and the first shall be last. And I learned about somebody who stood up and challenged the rich and powerful, who said it's easier for a camel to get through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich man to get into heaven. And, you know, here in the little red book, it's written, in the little red book, it says, "To die for the people is weightier than Mount Tai. But to work for the fascists and to die for the exploiters and the oppressors is lighter than a feather." Well, the reason that I got interested in communism, even though I didn't realize it at the time, was because I learned about somebody who died for the people. I learned about somebody who died for the people. I learned that there's more to life than money, there's more to life than fame, there's something to live for. Those values were instilled in me, and that's why I was on that ship. And I couldn't deny that. And, you know, you can talk about different things, but that's why I was on that ship at that moment. And then I've told this story about how when I got back to Iran, they took me to see the supreme leader of Iran, and I heard the supreme leader speak, and I was the only American standing in an auditorium of 20,000 people who were chanting, "Death to America, death to America," and tears poured down my face. And I thought, my God, and I thought about my family, and I thought about the people who grew up in a small town like mine and how they're suffering, and how the forces that the people around the world have called America have been just as vicious to them. Well, not just as vicious, they've been pretty vicious to them. They've driven down their living standards. You know, 3 people I went to high school with and graduated from high school with died from opioids. I only graduated with 115 people. And I think about that. I think about the neighborhoods where they're unpaving the roads, and that these big bankers and these monopolies have no loyalty to the people of this country. I came back to the United States, did some thinking. Then I was kind of forced out of the political group I was in, didn't exactly quit, wasn't exactly expelled. I was traveling around the country during the 2016 elections, and I kept thinking about all that I'd reflected on over the years. I kept thinking about how bad the situation was in the country. I went to cover Bernie rallies, talked to Bernie supporters, and I thought these people need to hear about communism. I talked to Trump supporters at Trump rallies, and I heard what they said, and I said, these people need to know about communism. And I saw the economy, and I saw the stock market, and I saw the suffering, and I said, God damn it, if no one else is going to build a ship, I need to. Message from God. Someone's going to clip that and say that's what I said. No, I don't think I have a message from God. Did you ever think that a black man named Barack Hussein Obama would be elected president of the United States? And did you ever think that Donald Trump would be elected president of the United States? And did you ever think that on the last day of Donald Trump's presidency, or on the very end, on January 6th, a bunch of rednecks would run through the White House, the Capitol building with horns on their head and act crazy? And did you ever think that all these kids on Twitter that are all calling everyone's a Nazi this and a Nazi that and everyone's a Nazi, Nazi, Nazi would then start fundraising and doing everything they could to support actual Nazis in Ukraine? I don't need some message from God to tell me where we're headed. I'm just trying to tell you what's right in front of your face. It's right in front of your face if you can see it. A storm is coming. A storm is going to come. I didn't try to see this. I told you I tried really hard not to see this. And I'm going to be open and honest with all of you right now, because I doubt myself sometimes. I'm not perfect. I'm just a guy. I'm doing this because no one else is doing it and it needs to be done. And it's difficult. They've told every lie about me that they can tell, and they are just getting started. And sometimes we know how they operate. They take things that might be true, mistakes you've made, and they twist them into things they absolutely are not. They do everything they can to try and take you down. And like I said, I'm not a perfect person. I've made big mistakes in my life. I'm not ashamed of it. And I'm not here to defend Caleb Maupin. I'm not here to convince you Caleb Maupin's a good guy or he's a perfect guy. I'm here to call out the imperialists. I'm here to do what needs to be done. And no one else is doing it, and I'm going to keep doing it. What they've done to me is nothing to what they've done to Tara Reade. She's an inspiration to all of us. This is the woman you should be clapping for. Now, what's behind the crisis? What's behind this crisis that we're facing? Well, we can find the answer. We can find the answer in the Communist Manifesto. This is what Karl Marx wrote back in 1848. He said, "In these crises, there breaks out an epidemic that in earlier epochs would have seemed an absurdity. The epidemic of overproduction. Society suddenly finds itself put back into a state of momentary barbarism. It appears as if famine, a universal war of devastation, had cut off the supply of every means of subsistence. Industry and commerce seem to be destroyed. And why? Because there's too much civilization, too much means of subsistence, too much industry, too much commerce. The conditions of bourgeois society are too narrow to comprise the wealth created by them." And how does the bourgeoisie get over these crises? On the one hand, by enforced destruction of a mass of productive forces, and on the other, by the conquest of new markets, and through the exploitation of the old ones. And that is to say, by paving the way for more extensive and more destructive crises, and by diminishing the means whereby the crises are prevented. The high-tech economy that they've created doesn't have a place for industrial workers in it. They have gotten so good at producing iPhones and iPads and every product that you want, and they've gotten so good at hiring as few people to do it, that now millions of us, as I've said before, stand outcast and starving amid the wonders we have made. And they've got two solutions to solve this. One, degrowth. Drive down our living standards, drive down our wages, make us all poorer, drive in poverty, grind us all into poverty. And two, have a big, huge war with their competitors in Russia, China, Venezuela, and Iran. That's their way out of the crisis. But we also have the opportunity to see the storm that's coming and to swing into action and do what needs to be done. But deeper than the fact that we have a crisis of the economic system of capitalism that's built in, we're heading toward what I think might be the ultimate big goddamn of capitalism. In addition to that, I think that there's a deeper crisis in the country because ideology is important. And I tell people what ideology is. Ideology is basically, imagine that you're driving a car. You're driving a car down the road, you know where you're going, you know where you came from, and you know how you're getting there. Your ideology is what enables you to go through life, right? You know where you came from, you know where you're going, you know how you're getting there. And of course, we can all imagine that, well, what if we had a Joe Biden moment, and suddenly we were driving down the road and didn't know where we were going, and didn't know where we came from, and, well, we'd stop the car, because we didn't know where we were going. Well, by depriving people in the United States of ideology, that's kind of what's happening. Now, we know the ideology that was here before was bullshit. America's the greatest country in the world. Right? Capitalism is the only only system that's ever worked. That's all bullshit. We know that. But you can take down those Confederate statues, you can burn the American flag, but if there's nothing to replace it, there's nothing to believe in, there's nothing to start building and constructing, you're just going to stop the car. And that's why I want to make abundantly clear, there's a beautiful, how do we do this? Yeah. There's a beautiful song that they sing in China. And it's called the Lei Fang song. They sing it in honor of one of the great martyrs of the revolution, Lei Fang. And one of the lyrics of the song, I kid you not, is, know where you are going and know where you came from. Know where you are going and know where you came from. And in China, every child on their first day of school is given a red scarf. And they're told that that's their little piece of the Chinese flag. And the red stands for all the people who died to get China where it is today, and that they get to wear that around their neck. They're young pioneers. They wear red scarves, and that's what it is. They know where they're going. They know where they came from. Well, I know where I'm going, and I know where I came from. Now, will you come with me? Will you come with me? Will you come with me? While society around us is falling apart, the time has come to start building. The time has come to start constructing. I've recited it many times, but I hope it can become a mantra. One of the most beautiful pieces of poetry I ever heard was from an old communist. And it's not a particularly communist piece of poetry, but I'll recite it here today because I want people to hear it. It goes like this. On a busy street in a busy town, I saw them tearing a building down. With a ho-heave-ho and a lusty yell, the men swung a beam and a sidewall fell. So I said to the foreman, are these men skilled, like those you might hire if you wanted to build? And the foreman just smiled and said, no, indeed. Unskilled labor is all that I need, for I can easily wreck in a week or two that which took builders years to do. So I thought to myself, as I walked away, which of these roles have I tried to play? Am I a builder who builds with care, measuring life with a compass and square? Am I living my life by a well-made plan and striving to do the best that I can? Or am I that type who scours the town, content with the labor of tearing things down? And that poem spoke to me, because right now, the capitalists of the world are wrecking. They're tearing everything down. And, it's tempting to go, yeah, burn it down, tear it down. But if we're not building anything at the same time, if nothing new is being built, that could head for a disaster. Go read what Rosa Luxemburg wrote about socialism or barbarism. Burn it down, tear it down doesn't necessarily lead to things getting better. It can lead to things getting worse, and that's not what we want. We've got to build up our own communities, and we've got to keep this community together. And that's what I'm begging you all to do, because not all of us agree with each other. And the internet is so dedicated to trying to get us to fight each other. Twitter is so good at finding the differences between all of us. And we all need to learn the art of seeing something by someone we agree with or we agree with on imperialism and agree with on our overall vision that we disagree with and going, I'm just going to let it go. Or I'll talk to them about it in person, where we can see human to human, where it doesn't turn into a big internet blow-up. We all got to practice that. And, we all got to get used to, look, the Uhuru movement was here. We saw them sit down for the national anthem. I don't care. They disagree with us on revolutionary patriotism. I don't care. That's not the point. The point is they're under attack by the government. That's the point. That they're under attack by the government. That's the point. No more raids. 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 Now, I want to talk about, John Brown. And I think, John Brown, we got a couple people are going to, help me with these pictures here. All right, thanks. Now, this guy, John Brown, they don't teach us enough about him in the history books. John Brown was an abolitionist. He was opposed to slavery, and he ultimately formed anti-slavery militias in the state of Kansas, and then he ultimately gave his life at Harper's Ferry in an attempt to seize control of weapons and build an army of freed slaves to drive out and fight the slave system. And John Brown, you know, he was a heroic, amazing individual, but he wasn't the deepest man you ever met. In fact, you know, if you read some of his writings, you read some of the accounts of his life, his most common argument against slavery and his most common explanation for why he did what he did, you know what it was? He said it was the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. If I was held in slavery, I would want people to fight for my freedom, so that's what I'm doing. I'm living by the golden rule. Very simple, not a complicated argument. You don't have to know about Hegel, you don't have to know about Sartre, you don't have to understand economics. It was just basic human solidarity. And he's one of the greatest heroes in American history. John Brown. But I also want to talk about this guy, because there's a lot of people talking about this guy now, Fred Hampton. Not enough people are actually reading what he wrote and listening to what he said. And there's plenty of video of him on the internet that you can watch. This man, he built free breakfast programs, he built community self-defense organizations, he built the original Rainbow Coalition, bringing together the different organizations of working people in Chicago. And this guy was all about unity. This guy was all about getting people to see what they had in common. But what was the name? What was the name of the Black Panther Party originally? What did they call it? It's called the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. Self-defense. You guys can sit down now. You put the pictures back. Self-defense. Nothing more American than self-defense, huh? Right? We love the Second Amendment here. Not all of us do, obviously, but that's a pretty American value, the right to defend yourself. And those of us who study the history of scientific Marxism, we reject what's called left adventurism, or terrorism. The idea that an isolated group of people are going to get some guns or explosives and go out and do something really exciting and heroic, then, we reject that. That's not scientific. We advocate a peaceful transition. We advocate moving towards socialism peacefully. But we do know that as the people organize, and as they build up their community organizations, as they start to struggle legally with strikes and protests, that the government will come down on them. And they do know that there may come a time where the American people have no choice but to do what is in our blood, defend ourselves. And it won't be us in this organization that do that. It won't be us that does it. We're a small group of people. We're a great group of us, but we're a couple hundred people in the Center for Political Innovation. It's going to be the broad masses of Americans in their millions that will defend themselves. What we offer is that when they do defend themselves, and when the moment comes that they do defend themselves, they have to know what they're fighting for. They have to know what they stand for, and they have to defend themselves in a way that actually gets us to something better. I just want to be totally honest with you. We're heading toward a new America. We are heading toward an America that's at peace with the rest of the world, with jobs and healthcare and education for all. We're heading toward an America where historically impoverished communities are lifted up. We're heading toward a new America where working class communities are lifted up, where every young person is viewed as an asset to the country and treasured and valued and cultivated so they can build a contribution to that society. That's what we're doing. But in order to get there, we need to build a community. We need to build an organization. We need to build a group of people who are committed to the hardship of being in an organization, are committed to getting through the arguments, getting through the long meetings and disagreements, getting through the disappointments that other people might give to you, getting through all of that in order to keep the organization together. We need that. Because that storm is coming. And that storm is coming. When that storm comes, it won't matter how many Facebook likes we've got. It won't matter how many Twitter shares we've got. All that is going to matter is going to be the network that we've built, the community that we've built, the relationships that we've had, the people that we've taught and educated. And when the storm comes, that is all that will matter. And that's what we need to keep our eyes on. That's what we need to keep our eyes on. Right? We're not competing with Jacobin. We're not competing with the Communist Party. We're not competing with some Maoist or Trotskyite group. We are essentially in a race against time. We're in a race against time. And the Uhuru raids, what happened to them, is a sign of what could be coming down the road. Maybe for our organization, we don't know. So we must work diligently, and we must build, and we must weather the hardship of building an organization. And we must learn to construct something, and we must learn to operate in ways that are different. There may be times where, right now, sure, we're operating openly as communists, we're talking about that. There may be times where we have to operate a little differently, where we have to, build what looks like a feminist organization, or build what looks like an Islamic organization, or a community healthcare organization. We may have to, on some level, conceal our love of Stalin. We may have to do that. And there also may be situations where we have to operate completely differently. We have to be committed to doing whatever is necessary and whatever needs to be done. We have to be down for the whole thing. We have to be down for the whole thing. Lenny Bruce, the comedian, he had a joke that he told that went like this. I don't know if you've ever heard it. He used to talk about the old 1950s television show. It's The Lone Ranger. The Lone Ranger, he wore a mask. He was a white dude. And then he had a Native American sidekick named Tonto. The story goes, the joke of Lenny Bruce is that the Lone Ranger and Tonto were surrounded by a group of Native Americans with their spears ready, pointed out at them. And they were facing the edge of a cliff. There was no escape. And so the Lone Ranger turned to Tonto and said, "Tonto, what are we going to do?" And Tonto said, "What do you mean we, white man?" Well, you think about that joke, I think that's what's ahead for the U.S. ruling class. Because they're looking at China rising up, and they're looking at Russia rising up, and they're looking at Venezuela and Iran, and they're turning to the American working class, and they're saying, "American working class." And I think Joe Biden's saying, "American working class, what are we going to do?" And the American working class is saying, "What do you mean we, Joe Biden? What do you mean we?" I get back to that quote from Marx about how the only way they can resolve the crisis is with enforced destruction of productive forces, the conquest of new markets, more thorough exploitation of the old ones, paving the way for extensive and more destructive crises. And I hear that, and I'll say one thing to the ruling class of the United States. You're not going to degrow us, and you're not going to cancel us, and we are going to keep organizing and fighting back and resisting, and we are going to build this organization, and we are going to lay the foundations for a whole new America to be built. That is what we are going to do. We are going to stay strong. We are not going to surrender. We will not be eliminated. Dare to win. They talk about these mass shootings that have happened, and one theme in these mass shootings they talk about is this so-called Great Replacement theory, right? This idea that, it's a white supremacist conspiracy theory. They're trying to eliminate the whites or something like that. And this is being promoted. And I'm sure there are a lot of people of color that hear that and say, "Are you kidding me? They've been trying to eliminate us for years." When I just graduated from high school, one of the socialist groups I was working with sent me to New Orleans on the anniversary of Hurricane Katrina. And I talked to people who'd been left on their rooftops to die. And I saw, what was happening to the black community at that time. And, my message to any of these people that are caught up in this white supremacist Great Replacement stuff is, I'm sorry, this is not a war against white people. This is a war against working people. And they're coming for all of us. They're coming for all of us. They've been coming for the black and brown people for a long time. They're coming for the white workers. They want to degrow all of us. They want to destroy all of us in order to save their system. And now is not the time to call people out and tear them down. You gain nothing by doing that. Did you know that? You gain nothing by destroying somebody and tearing them down. Now's not the time to do that. Now is the time to point out to people that now is an opportunity like no other to build solidarity. To get people to see that we have the same enemy. And that enemy ain't in Russia, it's not in China, it's not in Iran, and it's not in Venezuela, and it's not in Alabama, and it's not in Kentucky, and it's not in Arkansas. It's in Washington, D.C., and it's in the Pentagon. And that's really all I got to say for tonight. So I think Paul is going to play us a song. Then we'll have a brief Q&A discussion, and I think then we're going to be done. So Paul is going to play a song, and I believe, Paul, if I'm correct, your song is going to be in honor of Fred Hampton and John Brown, and some people are going to hold the pictures again while you play it, right? Am I correct? All right, go ahead.